by John Cohensep. 2017, 2:30 p.m. The influenza virus has yet to hit the northern hemisphere, but flu vaccine season is already in full swing, with banners outside pharmacies urging, "Get your flu shot now." What's not advertised, however, is just how lackluster the vaccine is. The most commonly used flu shots protect no more than 60% of people who receive them. Some years, effectiveness plunges to as low as 10%. Given that a bad flu season can kill 50,000 people in the United States alone, 10% to 60% protection is better than nothing, says Michael Osterholm, an epidemiologist at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. But it's a terribly inadequate vaccine for a serious public health threat. Now, researchers are striving to understand why it fails so often, and how to make a markedly better one. They're questioning what was once received wisdom, that the vaccine fails when manufacturers working months ahead of flu season incorrectly guess which strains will end up spreading. They're learning instead that the vaccine may falter even when the right strains were used to make it, perhaps because of how it is produced or quirks of individual immune systems. It's much more complicated than we thought, Osterholm says. I know less about influenza today than I did 10 years ago. The influenza vaccine teaches the body to produce antibodies against the head of the virus's surface protein, hemagglutinin, HA. Those antibodies ideally prevent HA from attaching to cellular receptors, thwarting infection. But HA's head is highly mutable, which is why vaccine makers must come up with a new formula every year. For many decades, researchers believed the flu vaccine offered solid protection if it was a good match to the circulating strains. Studies from the 1940s through the 1960s routinely showed an efficacy of 70% to 90%. But those studies relied on a misleading methodology. Without a simple way to detect the virus in the blood, researchers measured antibody levels, looking for a spike that occurs after infection. Then in the 1990s, sensitive polymerase chain reaction tests enabled researchers to actually measure viral levels, and they told a different story. It turned out that some people who did not have the big antibody spike after exposure, and were therefore counted as a vaccine success, actually did show a jump in viral levels, signaling infection. Earlier assessments had exaggerated vaccine efficacy. What's more, efficacy was sometimes low even when the vaccine and circulating strains appeared well matched. Something else was afoot. For decades, tests suggested the flu vaccine worked extremely well, but in the past 15 years a better test revealed many infections in vaccinated people who would previously have been deemed protected. Credits, Graphic, G. Grelin, Science, Data, F. MDAVENPORTETL. Med J. Ost. 1973, SUPPL 33-38, Centers for Disease Control. But Arnold Monto, an epidemiologist at the University of Michigan School of Public Health Ann Arbor, is skeptical that escape mutants play a major role. In a preprint published the 15th of August on Biorexiv, his team reports sequencing influenza DNA from 249 viral specimens collected from people over 5 influenza seasons. They found loads of HA mutations, as expected, but most weakened the virus, making it unfit, meaning it could not transmit human to human. Viable escape mutants, Monto concludes, are too rare to explain the failures seen year after year. Danuta Skowronski, an epidemiologist at the BC Centre for Disease Control in Vancouver, Canada, instead blames mutations in the vaccine strain itself. The most common influenza vaccine contains an inactivated virus, which manufacturers grow in chicken eggs. As Skowronski's team first reported in 2014, the virus can mutate while it is growing in the eggs, resulting in a vaccine unable to block circulating strains. I think these mutations play an enormous role, says viral immunologist Scott Hensley of the University of Pennsylvania. He has preliminary evidence that egg-adapted mutations were behind the weak protection seen with the vaccine used in the 2016-17 season, he says. He also points to a recent study by another group that compared an egg-grown vaccine with one that contained genetically engineered HA, which sidesteps the mutation issue. The engineered vaccine offered more solid protection. That suggests a way to improve current vaccines, Hensley says. I'd be shocked in 15 years if any of our flu vaccines are grown in eggs. When flu virus is grown in eggs to make the vaccine, mutations can occur in key places, red, on the viral surface protein, hemagglutinin, which undermine the shot's protective powers. Adapted from D. Skowronski et al. PLOS 193, the 25th of March 2014, copyright PLOS. Hensley notes another way to reduce the odds of failure, improving the techniques for choosing the vaccine strains. Vaccine makers largely rely on an old technique that exposes ferrets, which differ from humans, to candidate vaccine strains and then assesses whether they can stop viral isolates from people naturally infected with the circulating strains. Genetic comparisons, he says, would yield a better match. Understanding the immune responses that correlate with protection could also help refine vaccines. Immune responses to targets other than HA's head, including HA's stem and a second viral surface protein, neuraminidase, receive scant attention. Further complicating the picture is the immunologic legacy of multiple exposures to influenza each year.